This video is over lesson 81, using proportions to solve percent problems. For percent problems, we use a modified ratio box to help us solve, or we can use. The ratio column becomes a percent column, and the total percent is always 100%. So instead of ratio percent, still says actual. Now here we're going to have a group that the percentage is talking about, and then the not group, which is the opposite of whatever the percentage is talking about. So if we're talking about the percent of the class that are girls, then girls would be the group, and then boys would be the not group. And then the total, again, a total percent, if we take both groups and put them together, it'll be the whole thing, so the whole thing is 100%. And then over here for the total, obviously we just add those together to find that total. So remember that our proportion, though, only requires 2 rows and 2 columns. Thus, to write a proportion from the ratio box, we will ignore 1 row. So we're going to ignore a little bit of this. First, let's take a look at if we ignore the group. So if we ignore the group, I'm going to take my red pen here and ignore the group. So remember, with the ratio box, imagine literally if we could just, like a sticker, if you could peel the box off of here and then put in fraction bars and an equal sign, that's your proportion. So if we imagine peeling that off, this would be C over 100 equals D over the total B plus D. If we ignore the middle, the not group, again, just imagine peeling that off. So another proportion we can make here would be A over 100 equals B over B plus D. And then finally, if we ignore the total, so the third row, then I would just have A over C equals B over D. We're going to take a look at this with the practice problems from the book. So if you'll grab your books, please, and open up to page 565, 565. 565. Pause the video if you need to. Directions say estimate each answer, then use a ratio box to solve the problem. We're specifically just going to focus on the ratio box here. So estimating, remember with estimating involves rounding first to get numbers that will work nicely, and then doing the problem quickly with those nice numbers. So, but we're going to focus on the actual answer here. So A, 21 of 70 acres were planted with alfalfa. What percent of the acres was not planted in alfalfa? Okay, so 21 of the 70 acres were planted with alfalfa. So if I make my box here, since it's talking about a percent, what percent? I can go ahead and make this a percent box, percent ratio box. So that's percent. This is always actual. So the group here, the percent here we're talking about is alfalfa. And if I were to take a guess, this may be the first time in your life you've actually written the word alfalfa. I know it's a word that I've heard a lot, but I really haven't written it very many times. So alfalfa is the group that we'd be talking about here. So the not group would just be not alfalfa. And then the third row is the total. The total is always 100%. And now we're ready to start filling things in. Well, it tells us 21 of 70 acres were planted with alfalfa. So there are 21 actual acres of alfalfa. And total, there we go. And that's out of 70 acres. So 70 is the total. So if we do a little quick subtraction here, 70 minus 20 is 50, minus 1 is 49. So 49 acres must be not alfalfa. So what this problem doesn't tell me is either one of these percentages. So that's my percent ratio box. Now we want to solve this. So remember, to solve it, to make our proportion, we need 2 rows. We are always going to choose the row where we know everything. So I know everything in my total row. I know that's 100%, and I know there are 70 actual acres. The second row that I'm going to choose is whatever will answer the question. So the question's asking what percent were not alfalfa. So it's the not alfalfa that I'm interested in, which means we could ignore that top row. So if I imagine just peeling the box off like a sticker, I would have y over 100 equals 49 over 70. And then we can go ahead and solve that. So remember, to solve proportions, we cross multiply. So across from each other, y is across from 70, but we always put the number in front of the letter. So 70y equals 100 times 49, or 49 times 100, either way. Now you could go ahead and simplify this, or you can just divide both sides by 70. If I divide both sides by 70, over here my 70 and 70 cancel, which will leave me with just the y. Over here I can do a little reducing before multiplying. So I see that 7 goes into both 49 and 70. It goes into 49 7 times. It goes into 70 10 times. I can do some more reducing here. 10 and 100 both can be reduced by 10. 10 goes into itself once. 10 goes into 100 10 times. And now with a 1 on bottom, I know my answer will be a whole number. And that whole number is just going to be 7 times 10. So 70. Now consider where y is. Y is in the percent column. So that is 70% of the acres were not alfalfa. 70% of the acres were not alfalfa. Looking at B, Lori still has 60% of the book to read. If she has 120 pages, if she has read 120 pages, how many pages does she still have to read? Okay, so I'm talking about percents here, so I'm going to make a percent ratio box. So percent, this will be actual. The percent is talking about the amount of pages that she has read. So this will be read, and so this will be what she has not read. And then we'll have the total number of pages, which will always be 100%. Now we got to start looking at the numbers from the problem. So it tells us that Lori still has 60% of the book to read. She still has 60% to read, meaning she hasn't done that yet. So that must be the number that was not read. Little subtraction here. 60 or 100 minus 60 is 40. So she's read 40% of the book and 60% still to read. If she has read 120 pages, so she has actually read 120 pages, and that's the last number in the problem. So that means these are my unknowns. Right away, I know that in my proportion, I'm going to want that top row, that red row, because I know all of the numbers. Now the question is asking, how many pages does she still have to read? In other words, how many pages are not read yet? So that is the row that will answer the question. So this time, I get to ignore the total row. So if we imagine peeling the box off, we'll get the proportion 40 over 60 equals 120 over x. And now we'll cross multiply in order to solve this. So this is going to be 40 times x, or 40x. And on the other side, I'm going to have 60 times 120. Well, if I divide both sides by 40 now, because this is 40 times x, to get rid of it, I'm going to have to divide by 40. Over here, 40 and 120 can reduce by 40. So 40 will go into itself once, and then 120 divided by 40, and this is where a lot of students make a mistake and say 30. But think about that. Can you fit 30 40s and 120? Or put it another way, if you were to take a bunch of money and put them into groups of 40, would it take 30 of those groups to get $120? No, 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 no. It would just take 3 of those groups. So watch out for that. So 120 divided by 40 is just 3. Well, with a 1 on bottom, it means my answer is going to be a whole number. And so 60 times 3, that's like 6 times 3 with an extra 0 at the end. So 6 times 3 is 18, with an extra 0 at the end is 180. And now x is an actual number, and it's the total number of pages not read. Or if we put it the way the book says, this will be 180 pages left to read. Try and get that up there a little bit. So 180 pages left to read. Now I'm going to go ahead and divide this space into 2 columns, and hopefully you've got enough space for that too. And we'll put C right here. C, Dwayne missed 4 of the 30 problems on the problem set. What percent of the problems did Dwayne answer correctly? So again, I'm going to make my box. Since it's talking about percents, that'll be a percent column. I'll always have an actual. This time we're talking about percentage of problems correct. So this would be correct and not correct, or in other words, it's saying if a problem is correct means it's right, and if it's not correct, another way we could say that is wrong. It's a little shorter than correct and not correct. It means the same thing. And the third row is always total, which is always 100%. So looking at the problem, it says that Dwayne missed 4. So if you missed 4, that means that there are 4 wrong. So actually wrong is 4 out of the 30 problems. So there are 30 problems total. Little subtraction here, 30 minus 4 is 26 then that Dwayne got right. So what is the percent then? Well, I don't know this one or this one. Again, to make my proportion, I'm going to choose this row because I know all of it. And the problem is asking me how many did he get correct? Well, that's correct or right. So this time I'm going to ignore, and my pen's a little too thick for that, unfortunately. Let's see, I got a blue pen here, maybe I can, there we go. So we're going to ignore the middle row. Now you'll notice that I've run out of space here to put my proportion. When that happens, just put your proportion below your ratio box. So I've got x over 100 equals 26 over 30. And now we can go ahead and cross multiply. So x times 30 would be 30x. And 100 times 26, well, 26 times 100. Divide both sides by 30. Now leave me with x. Over here I can reduce these by 10. So 10 goes into 30 3 times, 10 goes to 100 10 times. Well, 3 and 10 do not reduce, and 3 and 26, oh, they don't reduce either. So that means that I'm going to have to go ahead and actually write this as a fraction. So 26 times 10 would be 260 over 3. And now fractions mean division, so that's the last thing I need to do, and I've got my answer. So if I come down here, I'm going to leave a space there for my answer. So that's where my answer is going to go. So I'm going to do my work down here real quick. So 260 divided by 3. Well, 3 goes into 2, not at all. 3 goes into 26, though, 8 times. 8 times 3 is 24. And if I subtract those, I get 2. Bring down the 0. 3 goes into 20 6 times. 6 times 3 is 18, with 2 left over. Now, with 2 left over and dividing by 3, some of you might know this already, this actually is going to turn out to be a repeating decimal. Remember, repeating decimals are not allowed unless the problem actually asks for a decimal. So nothing in problem C said give a decimal. So therefore repeating decimals not allowed. Therefore I'm going to take my remainder, my leftover 2, put it as the numerator. I'm going to take my denominator 3 and keep it the denominator. So this is 86 2/3. And then x is in the percent column, so it's really percent. Well, sorry, the percent there wouldn't go in our work. Our work is just the numbers, but in our answer there next to x. 86 2/3% is what Dwayne got correct. And ladies and gentlemen, we're going to skip part D. Part D is just asking what did you find. So A and C we found percents. And then B, since we solved for x, we found the part, not the whole. That's all D is asking for. So with that, that is the end of our lesson.